Shintaro Furukawa is the 6th president of Nintendo. He took over for Mr. Kimishima, who took over temporarily after Mr. Iwata passed away a few years ago. Mr. Iwata was the first president of Nintendo, not from the original Yamauchi family, who founded the company back on 1889. I think it is safe to say that Nintendo has never been a company that has shied away from change. When the company started back in the 1800s, it was a Hanafuda playing card company. And over its 130-year history, it ended up transforming into one of the biggest video game companies on the planet. Mr. Furukawa has recently said that it is possible that Nintendo could shift away from the home console market in an interview with Nikkei, which is a Japanese business publication. This is the kind of move that just about everybody expected after the abysmal sales during the Wii U era and during the GameCube era. But since then, Nintendo has launched the Switch and has been a lot more dominant in the marketplace. A lot of people, myself included, look at Nintendo as a company renewed. To hear Mr. Furukawa float the idea that they could get out of the home console business after launching such a massively successful console seems, well, a bit crazy. Let's forget about the idea that as a Nintendo-focused podcaster, this would be really bad for my show. Instead, let's just look at who would benefit from this. First and foremost, Microsoft and Sony would benefit from Nintendo moving to be a software-only company. Imagine a world where you can buy the latest Nintendo franchises on whatever platform you wanted. People have been calling for Nintendo to do this for a very, very long time, probably ever since Sega exited the home console market themselves. Sony and Microsoft would benefit not only from having some damn amazing games on their systems, but that's also one less competitor, bringing us right back to a two-system market. Microsoft and Sony wouldn't be the only ones to benefit from this move either. Nintendo would save massive amounts of money on research and development, money that they could pump into making more games. Their software teams could expand if they weren't spending so much money developing new hardware. That means more Nintendo games. And not only that, it would also mean Nintendo games on more systems. I think in the short term, we as video game players would also benefit. Nintendo would be making games for whichever platform we decided on. When you look at a PS4 or an Xbox One, with the exception of a few exclusives, for the most part, these systems are very potato. There isn't much that can differentiate them, and at the end of the day, I could not tell you which one is better than the other, even if I did pick a PS4 over an Xbox One. So now Nintendo fans could buy one of the two big consoles and still be able to play Nintendo games without having to buy a second console just to avoid missing out on games that were deemed too designed for consoles that were too powerful in order to run on Nintendo's plucky and weird hardware. After hearing me say all that, you're probably thinking that I am all in on this, but I'm not, because in the long run, I think that this would be horrible for the industry as a whole. If you look at the innovation that has happened in gaming, it's all Nintendo. Sony and Microsoft might have more powerful hardware, but every time they're showing off something new, it's all about, look at how big these numbers are. We've got the most powerful console ever. It only seems like Nintendo understands that it's not just a race for bigger numbers that drives the gaming industry forward. It's not just about more powerful consoles. It's not just about better graphics. It's new features that only Nintendo seems crazy enough to try. Analog sticks, shoulder buttons, motion control, touch screens, HD rumble. The idea that the Switch is powerful enough to make it a portable system rather than going all out to compete with Microsoft and Sony. Microsoft and Sony wouldn't do things like this. They would say, sure, we can make it portable, but then it wouldn't be the most powerful system in the world. They don't seem to understand that the Switch has graphics that are good enough, or that fun should come before how many polygons you can get on the screen at once. They let Nintendo take the risks and see what works, what catches on with gamers, and then they copy it. Without Nintendo leading the charge and innovating, I fear that the gaming industry would stagnate. It certainly isn't a bad business model to be in for Microsoft and Sony. I mean, it worked for Burger King. They let McDonald's do all the research to figure out where they should put their stores, and then they just put Burger King stores across the street. Microsoft does the same exact thing with Apple stores. But without Nintendo innovating, I fear the gaming industry would stagnate. And it would become a relentless race for higher numbers. And trust me, I'm all for good graphics, but if graphics were all we cared about, then there are a lot of features that are considered staples in the gaming industry today that we might not have right now. That being said, even though Mr. Furukawa has signaled that this is a possibility, I don't think that Nintendo will actually abandon the hardware market. What I do see happening is for them to start making a bigger focus on mobile games, which isn't something that I am interested in at all. Unfortunately, mobile games are huge right now, and the video game consumers are sealing their own fate. Companies like Blizzard and Nintendo wouldn't be interested in making mobile games if it weren't so damn profitable. People complain that they don't want their favorite gaming companies investing in mobile, but then they turn around and play Candy Crush or whatever the new hotness is for hours at a time, dumping giant piles of money on these companies. Who can blame the gaming companies for looking at a business that has a much lower overhead in return for skyrocketing profits? Even as more and more companies move from high overhead, high risk business like video games to low risk, high reward mobile games, Nintendo could also just keep trucking with their portable business. They are the de facto king of portable games. And even though they spent the first year of the Switch's life referring to it as a home console that you can take with you, I think that if you asked most people, they would refer to the Switch more like a portable system that just happens to be able to hook up to a TV. It might seem like I'm splitting hairs here, but it is an important distinction. And in his recent statement, I think Mr. Furukawa was very careful in his word choice. Note that he didn't say that Nintendo would stop making their own hardware, just that there is a possibility that at some point, Nintendo might stop competing in the home console business. Hell, if you ask a lot of people, some would say that they already have stopped competing. Nintendo hasn't directly competed with Microsoft or Sony in a very long time. This would just be more of the same. So at the end of the day, Nintendo's never been a company that's afraid of change. But I know there's a lot of people who read this and they're running around like the sky is falling. Nintendo is a very conservative company, or traditionally has been. And now that Mr. Furukawa is in charge, that doesn't necessarily mean that things will change overnight. At the end of the day, we really don't know what Nintendo's going to do until they tell us. But with as much success as they've had with the Nintendo Switch, I really doubt that they would move away from the hardware business altogether. They're just too good at it.